You're, you're.
All right, so our original main event this week was going to be different, and I decided not to do it because we had a special guest. So I changed it to be more special guest friendly. And so what we are talking about this week is um, Matthew Perry. So as you guys may know, I think Matthew Perry passed away before we started doing this podcast, or we would have probably talked about it. But
I think so.
yeah, he passed away before we started doing this show. But there's just been a pretty big announcement within this story. But just to catch you guys up, you guys might remember that Matthew Perry passed away, I think, in his hot tub, and they found that he had overdosed on ketamine and drowned in his hot tub, if I remember
I knew
correctly.
about the ketamine, but I didn't know he drowned.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he OD'd and then drowned in the hot tub. Now, correct me if I'm wrong out there. You're more than welcome to do so. But here recently, 5 people were charged in the death of Matthew Perry, including the actor's doctor and his personal assistant. Okay, 5 people who have been charged in connection with Friends star Matthew Perry's death from quote the acute effects of ketamine unquote last October. During a Thursday news conference, Martin Estrada, the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, announced a shocking number of charges against the 5 defendants. This doesn't surprise me because we've seen this story regurgitated before. People
Yeah.
like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston. There's so many of these, unfortunately. But anyway, physician Salvador Placencia, who is 42 years old, and 41-year-old Jasveen Sangha, whom the DOJ's press release referred to as the quote unquote ketamine queen of North Hollywood, face 18 criminal counts for allegedly distributing ketamine to Perry during the final weeks of the actor's life. Now, if you guys are a fan of Matthew Perry, you guys are going to be absolutely livid at this story because you will not believe some of the shit that these people were saying about Matthew Perry as they were essentially killing him. Back to the story. Co-conspirators named in the case are Perry's live-in assistant Kenneth Iwamasa, who's 59, Dr. Mark Chavez, who's 54, and Eric Fleming, who's also 54, who was described as Perry's acquaintance. Iwamasa and Fleming pleaded guilty earlier this month to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine. Fleming pleaded guilty to an additional charge of distribution of ketamine resulting in death. Chavez, quote, has agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine, unquote, the Department of Justice said. Iwamasa faces up to 15 years in prison, and Fleming's charges come with a maximum sentence of 25 years. Chavez, who is scheduled to be arraigned August 30th, faces up to 10 years in prison. USA Today, which is where this story is, has reached out to an attorney for Sangha for comment. Court records have not been updated with Placencia's legal representative. Now, they did find some text messages where these people were essentially calling the Friends star a moron, quote unquote, a moron, as they were trying to essentially sell him ketamine and scam him out of money while keeping his addiction fed. Um, just absolutely sickening shit, man.
Absolutely.
Estrada said the defendants in this case knew what they were doing was wrong in the press conference. For those of you out there who may not know, ketamine is a drug that must be administered usually by medical professionals, and the patient must be monitored closely. If you've ever had ketamine in the hospital, they literally check on you all the freaking time.
Horse tranquilizer.
Essentially, right. And so that did not occur here. And then the defendants obviously not only did they cause this death according to the charges, but they also tried to cover it up afterwards, according to Estrada. Estrada also issued a warning to those who irresponsibly distribute and administer ketamine that you are playing roulette with other people's lives, just like these 5 defendants here did to Mr. Perry. And that's part of this that I really wanted to kind of look at as well. If Matthew Perry was not this uber famous actor, would these 5 people be in trouble?
No,
Right? And I don't think so. Right?
not unless they got caught in some form or fashion like this.
Exactly, and that's what worries me. Like, I'm glad that they're facing repercussions for this, but the fact is, if Matthew Perry wasn't a known person, then chances are we would never hear about this case.
Yep, absolutely. Just being where I'm from, like you see a lot of it. Like everyone, well, not everyone, but I know a lot of people have seen their fair share of like drugs and, I mean, in some form or fashion. So, I mean, personally, being where I'm from, this is not unusual, someone overdosing. Um, so I know none of that shit's making the news,
Right.
you know?
To go
So,
to go further in this story, in the same statement or in a different statement on Thursday, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration's administrator Ann Milgram said that the 5 defendants, quote, played a key role in Perry's death by falsely prescribing, selling, or injecting the ketamine, unquote. Matthew Perry's journey began with unscrupulous doctors who abused their position of trust because they saw him as a payday to street dealers who gave him ketamine in unmarked vials, Milgram said. In a news release and a press conference Thursday, investigators laid out the moments that led to Perry's October death at his LA home. I'm going through this entire article. Usually we read like the beginning and then give our comments, but this one is kind of important to get the full story.
to
Okay?
unpack, yeah.
Right. Now, according to the DOJ news release issued Thursday, Placencia, the doctor, learned that Perry was interested in obtaining ketamine in September of 2023. Now, keep in mind, Perry died in October, so not too long after this, okay?
Before we get too far, I just want to make a comment.
Okay.
It says that the 5 defendants played a key role, and it said possibly like injecting it. If that, it says, Ann Milgram said, what the hell? Anyway, something about injecting. If that is the case, that takes it to a whole nother level. That's literally murder.
It
Because
could.
if you're a dealer, and if you're, I mean, I'm sorry, if you're around that 24/7,
I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, Katie, the doctor who ended up doing time for the death of Michael Jackson was convicted of injecting Michael Jackson,
yeah,
and he got manslaughter, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
So I just want to. I don't know if it's possible to get murder out of that. Perhaps you
That's
could.
what I meant, but
Right. I think you
something
could
like
get
killing
murder.
someone.
I think you could get murder out of it if another felony was
Well, and
committed at the
murder would,
same
you
time.
have to show intent, right?
I guess probably yeah.
Well, because manslaughter is like accidental kill,
Right.
mildly, or like negligence, right?
Yeah. Right.
Whereas murder is more planned, you
That's a
know.
very good point. Very good point. Manslaughter charges right there. I wonder how many other people have bought from the same alleged dealer. That's a great question, honestly. And so we're going to continue on here. And she's right in where they said falsely prescribing, selling, or injecting the ketamine. And I would
Yeah,
imagine, depending on what
and
they have. And again, it looks like 2 or 3 of them are pleading guilty anyway, right? So
and also I feel like it easily could be an injecting thing because of the way their max sentences fall, like what they're being charged with and everything. I know, like, people are gonna like sell people out and crap, but like, I don't know, somebody's facing up to 10 years and the other one's facing up to 25.
yeah,
Like, that's quite a difference. You must have done something.
right.
a lot worse than these
And
people.
so, as the story said, Placencia is the doctor here, and he found out that Perry was interested in obtaining ketamine in September of 23. Later, Placencia contacted Chavez, who used to operate a ketamine clinic, to obtain the anesthetic drug with the purpose to sell it to Perry. According to investigators, Placencia sent a text message to Chavez that included, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay, and let's find out." Okay, that's an actual text message. According to investigators, on October 28th, 2023, this is the day that Perry died, his live-in assistant, Iwamasa, injected Perry with the ketamine, as he had done several times before, without proper medical licensure to complete the injections. The ketamine used in Perry's death was sold by Fleming and Sangha, officials allege, and administered with instructions and syringes provided by Placencia. Okay? Now, Placencia allegedly sold the drug to Iwamasa, who again is Perry's assistant, although he was informed at least 1 week prior to Perry's death that his addiction to ketamine was, quote, spiraling out of control, unquote. Later, Sangha allegedly texted Fleming to, quote, delete all our messages, unquote, after news of Perry's death came out. Later, the Los Angeles Police Department executed a search warrant at Sangha's, quote unquote, stash house and reported to have found evidence of drug trafficking, including approximately 79 vials of ketamine, as well as several other drugs. According to court records reviewed by USA Today, U.S. attorneys filed a complaint in March of 2024 accusing Sangha of possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine. The federal case against her was updated with the first superseding indictment, which was unsealed Thursday and also named Placencia on Wednesday. Now, on September 30th, Iwamasa, again, let's keep in mind, Iwamasa was Perry's personal assistant, learned how to inject ketamine after Dr. Placencia, who was nicknamed Dr. P, administered 2 shots of ketamine to Perry, and then taught the personal assistant how to make injections and left behind a vial for him to do so. For days, Iwamasa also used coded language to communicate with co-conspirators to obtain more ketamine. But 2 weeks before his death, on October 12th, investigators say Placencia administered a large dose of ketamine to Perry, which caused an adverse medical reaction that led to a blood pressure spike, which caused Perry to freeze up where he could not speak or move. According to the plea agreement, Placencia allegedly told Iwamasa, quote, let's not do that again, unquote. Now, keep in mind, that was literally 2 weeks before he died. 2 weeks before he died, they gave him enough ketamine to give him a reaction that led to a freeze up where he could not speak or move. The doctor then told the personal assistant, let's not do that again. And then 2 weeks later, Matthew Perry was dead. Anyway, the court documents also appear to suggest that Iwamasa and Perry planned to take a break from ketamine use, as Placencia, who is listed as co-conspirator 1 in court documents, texted Iwamasa, quote, hi, I know you mentioned taking a break. I have been stocking up on the meanwhile. I am not sure when you guys plan to resume, but in case it's when I'm out of town this weekend, I have left supplies with a nurse of mine, unquote. On October 28, 2023, the day that Matthew Perry died, Iwamasa allegedly injected him with a shot of ketamine at 8:30 a.m. and again in the afternoon at 12:45 p.m. as Perry watched a movie. Then, about 40 minutes later, Perry asked his personal assistant to prepare his hot tub and, quote-unquote, shoot me up with a big one, in reference to another injection of ketamine, which would be the third one of that one day. Iwamasa later injected Perry with a third syringe of ketamine and gave it to him in or near the jacuzzi. According to authorities' timetable, Perry had received 3 ketamine shots in a 5-hour period.
No shit.
And
Found
later,
it.
Perry was found dead. On October 28th, the LA Fire Department responded to Perry's Pacific Palisades home at 407 and found an adult male unconscious in a standalone jacuzzi. Responding officers pronounced him dead at 4:17 p.m. Quote, a rapid medical assessment sadly revealed the man was deceased prior to first responder arrival. Nicholas Prange, an LAFD spokesperson, told USA Today in a statement on October 30th. Which
Why did
means
it take that long? 4 o'clock.
because basically what they're doing is they're shooting him up and then leaving him alone. And the reason why this is such a, I mean, it's a very potent drug. And when you take it in, I
I know,
mean, when
but
you
that
take it in the ER, they
automatically.
literally check on you every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so when you're in the ER on this drug. It is super powerful. And they're administering him a drug while he's literally chilling in a hot tub. Like, what are you doing, bro?
Idiot.
And
That
then,
I'm sorry. No one in this story should only get a maximum of 10 years.
yeah, I don't know.
All of this is just horrific. Out of everyone being charged, the doctor and the assistant are, I feel, most responsible. There are drugs everywhere. You can find drugs wherever you want them.
Hmm.
This, I mean, you can find ketamine anywhere. I'm sure around there as well.
I'm sure.
But the doctor showed the assistant how. They both kept feeding his habit bad, like to the point where she was like, the text that you just read saying like if she's going to be out of town if you need any, that's encouraging.
Yep.
That's like someone that's on a diet and you wave a chocolate bar in front of their face. That's
Hmm.
what that is.
Yep.
Like, and then the assistant,
No, I mean we
you
want
know
to
damn well.
we can blame all 4 or 5 of these people, and they all deserve some of that blame. But let's keep in mind that this man was also wanting this stuff. He was an
No,
addict, and
absolutely.
I feel like a lot of times we try to separate the blame from the person who actually OD'd and died. And he's, I mean, it's sad,
You're right.
but sadly they are also culpable, right? I mean, it is what it is. It's not
I
like they're
didn't
shooting him up without his knowledge, right?
I I didn't agree necessarily at first. I mean, I knew about all of this, but we've read a lot. You know, this is more information than I knew. At first, I was like, "Why that? This dude is an addict. Why is anyone else being charged? That's his fault." But getting more into this, calling him a moron is really funny,
Yeah.
considering this assistant is going to shoot him up 3 times in 5 hours.
Yep.
That's pretty damn stupid. I'm sorry. Whether you know anything about drugs, everyone knows ketamine is awful.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah, and just for some basis of context here, I think this is important. I want you guys to know this, in case you don't know what ketamine is or what his levels were according to his autopsy report. This is insane right here. Okay, I'm just going to try to be descriptive here. Katie and I can say that the drug is super insane and it's super addicting, and all of that is true. But let's talk about what it is and how much his levels were. Ketamine
Mhm.
is a disassociative anesthetic. That's what it is. And it has hallucinogenic effects as well. It distorts the perception of sight and sound, according to the DEA's website. Now, the medical examiner in this case said the amount of ketamine found in his system was as high as 3,540 nanograms per milliliter. And I know everybody's like, whoa, I don't know what that means. I'm going to give you some context. Levels for general anesthesia. When you take ketamine before a surgery, that level of general anesthesia is typically in the 1,000 to 6,000 nanogram per milliliter ranges. He was at 3,540. So he was higher than mid on their scale of general anesthesia when they conducted the autopsy.
All done within 5 hours.
Right.
And that shit goes out of your system too. Like the first dose that
That's
you
what
had
I'm
at the top
saying.
of those hours,
Those levels are always going to be lower than they were at the time of
because
death.
that was at 4 o'clock that
Right.
they even found him.
So it just depends on how long it took them to do the autopsy report. And I don't know the biology of this drug and how long it takes to, come down or whatever the terminology is.
It's
Um,
unfortunate that I know this, but for usually a good say is about an hour in general. For peak time or how long it lasts.
Well, there's more information. I just found it here. It says Perry was reported to be receiving ketamine infusion therapy for depression and anxiety, according to the report. And his last session for that was reportedly 1.5 weeks before his death. Was the last time he had a ketamine infusion therapy. And according to the report's notes, when I say report's notes, I'm talking about the autopsy report here.
right.
The ketamine in his system at his death could not be from the infusion therapy
Yeah,
because the ketamine's half life is 3 to 4 hours or less.
yeah, I know really anything hard. Ketamine, heroin. Meth sticks around a lot longer, not a lot longer, but usually I know heroin out of your system within a day. Like no traces of it. There is like all these hard drugs, like they are in and out. You never that's why you can never pop a crackhead
Mhm.
unless they got it on them.
Well, it's
Because in and
sad.
out.
It sucks that the man is gone. It sucks equally that this is the way he went out. Addiction
Absolutely.
sucks. I
Hmm.
hate that he's gone again, but I'm that guy that's always going to be like, yo, if this wasn't Matthew Perry, we would not have heard about it, right? Like, it just would not, this would not be making the news. But at the same time, I want folks out there to see, and that's why I always want to kind of give a different take on the stories that we give. It's not always just going to be talking about the actual facts of it, but also the fact of the matter is, again, like I said, if it was Joe somebody, you'd never hear about
Joe
it.
Blow.
All right. So many other people probably have died from it than we haven't heard
Oh
about.
yeah.
And yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, that chick was called the Queen of Ketamine.
Well, yeah, and not only that, like, I mean, this guy was a predator. He was openly targeting addicts and calling them morons, and I mean, so there's definitely more out there. It just so happened that these people, they go too far. That's what happened with Michael Jackson. The guy gave him
Yeah.
too much, and there was nobody there to monitor it, and poof, death.
And I don't give a shit if you're a good person. I don't care if you're paying me $1 billion a day and I work for somebody crazy, Matthew Perry. You can't pay me enough. I will not do it
Mm-hmm.
to that extent. Even if I did it, which I would never. You know damn well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you cannot be a good person to do that. I'm sorry.
Well, taking advantage of other people's weaknesses is a very predatory thing to do, and it's people like that don't normally change. You know,
Mm-mm. If
so
you
it's
don't see a problem with that, then there's a problem with you.
yeah, I agree. So sadly, that is our main story this week.